It's been quite the hot topic around Vancouver Canucks Nation on Twitter, on the radio, on Facebook, on all sorts of Vancouver Canucks-related discourse. I know Clay Emu made a video about this very same topic yesterday. He actually made his video, and I was already in the process of planning out what we would talk about in this video, so very nice to see the collaborations on ideas there, because, you know, great minds do think alike. So I'll leave a link in the description to Clay Emu's video. You can take a look at his take on this whole situation as well. But today we're talking about the Vancouver Canucks and the idea of improvement. Because when it comes to the overall Canucks on paper, there's a lot of room for debate in terms of where exactly this team has improved, where this team has taken a step back, and whether or not those improvements or those steps back counteract each other to project a team that will be better or worse than what we saw in 2019-20. Now, the 2019-20 team was great. It succeeded all expectations, and it was in a spot where they were literally a win away from the Western Conference Finals. A win away from being one of the top 4 teams in the NHL. That's really good, especially for a team that a lot of people were projecting, okay, maybe they can contend for a wild card, or maybe they can finally just barely squeak in. This was a team that, off of the backs of JT Miller, who came over here via trade, Elias Pettersson, who was a rookie sensation doubling down on his second year, Quinn Hughes, who was a brand new guy out of the University of Michigan ready to dazzle the pants off of the NHL, plus the extended performances of guys like Jacob Markstrom, guys like Brock Besser, and continued sustainability from guys like Alex Edler, Chris Tanev, and Bo Horvat. All these factors combined for a team that many people saw was on the way up, a team that many people saw could barely squeak in, but a team that ultimately found itself in the second round, one win away from round number 3. So, the question is this team going to take a step back? And furthermore, we have so many people who do believe that with the losses that this team has had, that's inevitable. Take a look at this hit over here on the TV. It's That's Hockey with Farhan Lalji and Mike Johnson, where they talk about the Vancouver Canucks. Taj over here on Twitter tweeted out what exactly some of the opinions were in this piece. Farhan Lalji said that this team will be lucky to tread water in 2021. Mike Johnson said, there'll probably be a first-round exit. Making the playoffs would be realistically as far as they can go. So, let's talk about what exactly it was the Vancouver Canucks did, who's in, who's out, and how exactly these ups and downs project the team going forward. So, in goal, probably the easiest one to identify, you have yourselves a tandem of Markstrom and Demko going over to a tandem of Holtby and Demko. Markstrom, Holtby, who's better? Probably Markstrom. Obviously, the contract situation does play a part into it, but that's taking into account the long term. We're only really caring about next season. Despite the fact that Braden Holtby is a good goaltender, I think, in my own personal opinion, Markstrom is an upgrade on Holtby. Now, the question is whether or not Thatcher Demko will be able to play like Vegas Thatcher Demko for the majority of the season. If he is, then my gosh, you don't even really need Jacob Markstrom now, don't you? Actually, no, I take that back. I guess having a Markstrom, who is very, very good, one of the best goaltenders in the league, in my opinion, and a Vegas Thatcher Demko together would probably be the most unstoppable goaltending tandem in the league, but at the end of the day, having a guy like Thatcher Demko who is very good, that is indeed a very good part as well. I guess you could say that Thatcher Demko in the regular season of 2019-20 was not as good as Thatcher Demko against Vegas, so that kind of balances out what you would say would be the case if you're taking a look at just straight up 2019-20 Markstrom Demko versus 2020-2021 Demko and Holtby. But at the end of the day, it's inconclusive. I think most people would say that Markstrom in the short term is an upgrade over Holtby, so for now we're just gonna say, hey, the easy route is just saying the Canucks got worse in goal. Next up, defense. Who's out on defense? You have Chris Tanev and Troy Stecher, who left. You also have Oscar Fantanberg, who left too. Coming in to fill those spots, you have Brogan Rafferty, you have Jack Rathbone, you have Olli Levy, you have Jalen Chatfield, and you also have the big guy, Nate Schmidt. Now, Schmidt is a very good defender. I'd say that probably he's better in terms of overall value to a team than Chris Tanev and Troy Stecher, because his offensive flair, his overall puck-moving ability, it's very strong, very solid. He was a #1 defender for the Vegas Golden Knights for quite a while. So in terms of taking a look at Schmidt versus Tanev, Tanev brings a very, very specific and very definable playstyle that isn't really replicated by anybody else on the team pretty much. The fearlessness to always block shots and be very smart in his own zone. However, stability has been a concern with Tanev. We have not seen him play a full season in his career until this most previous season. So, going into the long-term future, with the fragility of his game, who knows how sustainable that playstyle is going to be. It's why there is a debate you could definitely make as to whether or not one or the other, Schmidt or Tanev, would be more valuable. But for the sake of argument, let's say it's Nate Schmidt. As for the other guys, Stecher and Fantanberg, who's more valuable to a hockey team? Stecher and Fantanberg, or whoever the Canucks have to replace them? Whether that's Juolevi and Rafferty, or it's Juolevi and somebody else that they sign, or Chatfield or something, who knows? At the end of the day, I think Oscar Fantanberg was honestly pretty good on this team, and Troy Stecher, we all know the story of Troy Stecher, heart and soul guy, everybody loved him here. However, you could make the debate that his overall skill set as a hockey player was not as strong as the fans' love for the hockey player. That's an argument I think I saw some people making on Twitter, but I'd prefer not to get into that conversation here in this video. But again, just like the Thatcher Demko argument, it's very debatable as to whether or not Juolevi and Rafferty would be as valuable to a team than Stecher and Fantanberg were. Because one of these guys, they're going to be in the press box, you know, that's kind of how it goes. You have Jordy Ben tossed up in there, he's still on this team too. So overall, just for the sake of having hindsight and knowing what these guys are capable of doing at the NHL level, I think it's very fair to say that the defense from last year with Stecher, Tanev, and Fantanberg is more valuable and a little bit stronger than the defense we'll have this year with Schmidt, Rafferty, and Juolevi or Rathbone or whoever fills out those Stecher and Fantanberg spots. Obviously, it's just an argument. I would probably say that Schmidt is more valuable than Tanev, but the other two guys definitely do play a part in it as well. But at the end of the day, you could definitely say that this year's defensive core could be better too because Quinn Hughes is a guy who is going to improve. Who knows what sophomore Quinn Hughes is going to look like, because if this guy can come in here and take over the reins of the NHL's defense, then my gosh, we could really be taking a look at a better defensive core. And the same thing could be said on forwards, because you lost out on Tyler Toffoli. You lost out on the guy that you acquired to replace Brock Besser in the lineup. But you still have Brock Besser in the lineup. Remember, this Vancouver Canucks team made the playoffs mostly without Tyler Toffoli. This Canucks team in the playoffs eliminated St. Louis without Tyler Toffoli. And sure, he had a really good debut against the Vegas Golden Knights, but at the end of the day, sure, you could say the forward core got worse because you don't have Tyler Toffoli anymore, but the same argument applies to Petey, Miller, Besser, these two guys, and Horvat too. These guys all took their games to another level over the course of 2019-2020, and just taking a look at what is the natural step forward, you could definitely debate that what these guys have and the upwards potential of them going forward would be more valuable than what we saw out of 2019-20. So, for forwards, it's a little bit of a toss-up. Same thing with the defense. I said the defense probably on paper lies in favor of the 2019-2020 team, but of course, Quinn Hughes is the outlier there. Same thing is said for the forwards. The upwards progression of the guys we mentioned earlier will dictate that conversation. But I think at the end of the day, if you're a more pessimistic fan, it's definitely fair to see that a Quinn Hughes by himself improving is not going to take over what was lost in the value of a Chris Tanev, a Stecher, and a Fantanberg. Sure, it's kind of weird to explain it like that, but at the end of the day, the upwards progression of this hockey team in terms of overall performance relies on a whole bunch of what-ifs. It relies on a whole bunch of upwards potential, ceiling, and capacity for growth. It doesn't rely on what we have solidified in the truth. So, to me personally, I would not be surprised if the Vancouver Canucks took a step back. If Thatcher Demko kind of fell back down to earth a little bit, he wasn't up and away the Vegas Thatcher Demko that we saw for a full season, I wouldn't be surprised. If Quinn Hughes came out here and had somewhat of a similar year to his first year, or maybe even a little bit of a worse year because of the sophomore slump, I would not be surprised. And if Elias Pettersson and JT Miller kind of falter off on that chemistry a little bit, maybe it's a possibility, and I wouldn't be surprised if it happens, because we have seen sometimes throughout the past few years of Canucks hockey, these duos, these really good pairs that we see in the regular season kind of falter off in the next year. It happened with Verbata, it happened with the BBB line, it happened with Louis Eriksson, it happens quite often, and It's gotten to a point where as a pessimistic Canucks fan, I can definitely see it happening. Obviously, I wouldn't want it to happen, but if it did happen, I wouldn't be surprised. And the fact is, if all this stuff happened all at once, then a step back is the natural conclusion. But of course, the contrary is also possible too. These guys could absolutely just tear worlds next year, and I wouldn't be surprised if that happened either. It's why, to me, the Vancouver Canucks are one of the most polarizing teams, because they can be really good. It's just you don't know if that's actually going to happen. So all we have to do as fans is to take a look at it at face value and say, yep, this team has the potential to go further in terms of their overall dominance on the ice, but there's a very good chance they take a step back too. Which is why some people in the media are saying, yeah, I'm projecting them to not even make the second round, which is a fair argument because you lost out on your MVP goaltender, you lost out on your number one defensive shutdown defenseman, and you lost out on Tyler Toffoli. So we covered a whole bunch of stuff here. Talk to me in the comments what you think. Are the Canucks bound to taking a step back next year, or are they going to push further? Links are down in the description to Clay Emu's video. I hope you enjoyed this video. That is for us in 99. And bye.